always cool in Mesa.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this live taping of It's Always Cool in Mesa. This is the thing I like about this podcast is we talk about stories that are really cool Mesa stories, but maybe you just don't, you don't know all the details. Like cool things at the Mesa Cemetery, or the Zito Ishikawa story at Mesa High School, or some things that are going on in downtown, that are really very cool stories. And so ever since I became aware of Troy, I knew that this was definitely one of those Mesa stories that we needed to dig into a little deeper and tell the story, because it's so inspirational. So thank you for joining us in the IKEA Theater at the Mesa Art Center. I think we're very proud of this. And for those who are listening to the podcast, let me just kind of set the stage that just a few minutes ago, I had the great privilege as the mayor of Mesa to present the key to the city to Troy Kotsur. And we, during the course of that presentation, Troy, I kind of recounted the long list of awards that you've received so far this year, from the Screen Actors Guild and many, many other awards, ultimately leading up to the Academy Award. And I just have to ask, to get things going, was there ever a period of time during that year that you lost hope that at some point you might not get the key to the city of Mesa, Arizona?
I didn't know. When we were in New York, it was the Gotham Awards, and I wasn't sure if I was going to win or not. It was the very first event of a very long awards season. And I learned that the Gotham Awards is recognizing films under the budget of $35 million. So independent films is what they were focusing on. So I was watching, competing against 8 other nominees. And I was watching the ceremony. There was 4 female nominees, 5 female, 4 and 4 or 5 and 5. So it was very competitive. And so I didn't think I had a chance. And so at the Gotham Awards, I didn't even know what it was. I thought it was something to do with Batman. Gotham City and Batman? So that was a new experience for me. And I was quite naive. And so then they announced my name. I knew I was a nominee. And so I never thought I had a chance of winning. I was so used to being nominated on the theater stage from time to time. And I was like, yeah, it's the same old thing. And it just so happened they called my name as the Best Supporting Actor at the Gotham Awards, and I won that award. And so Marlee Matlin was there with me, and she won for Children of a Lesser God, of course. She won an Oscar. And she said, Troy, this is the beginning of award season. So it started with the Gotham Awards in November, and it went all the way to the Oscars in March. And so I really didn't know that you would get a bonus with an award. You got a cash bonus, and I didn't know that.
Nice.
I just thought I was receiving this statue, and that was it. But I really didn't know about the bonus either. And I told myself, oh my gosh, I was so naive. I was just doing what I loved, and I loved watching award ceremonies and seeing who would be recognized for their craft, and I never thought that there was money as a part of that too, but it was amazing.
Well, I'm not sure that there's a cash bonus associated with the key to the city. Let me know how that key to the bank thing works.
Oh, I was hoping that I'd break into the bank. That's why I mentioned that, so I could get into any bank in Mesa.
But hopefully the key to the city is a nice cherry on top of all these other awards that you've received. And I just have to tell you, I think now that you've won this one, I think the phone is going to start ringing. I think you're really going to see an uptick in the interest in your career now that you've got this one on your resume. So I'm excited for you. Seriously, Troy, the night I had the privilege of attending your family's watch party. But thank you, Jill. Thank you, family, for inviting me to do that. And we were blown away when you walked up to the microphone and you gave a shout out to your hometown of Mesa, Arizona, in front of the whole wide world. None of us were expecting that. Where did that come from?
Me neither. I never thought it would happen to me.
Well,
You know, I was just doing what I loved from my heart. I didn't realize that could lead to something that could actually affect the city of Mesa. I feel so proud. And a few months ago, my two brothers sent me a picture. And it was a banner of my face on Main Street.
Yeah.
And I was so touched to see that.
I understood you took the banner home, right? But the problem is this banner is awkwardly huge, right? I mean, it's literally your face the size of a building.
It doesn't fit in my living room. I'm still trying to figure out where to put it.
Well,
you know, maybe on the ceiling.
yeah.
And we could have it on the ceiling, maybe.
Well, thanks for taking it to your house. I'm not sure what we would have done with it. But hopefully the key finds, you know, an appropriate place in your living room. So Troy, you are clearly not just being nice to Mesa. I mean, you are a Mesa guy. You and I were talking a minute ago. You and I were born in the same hospital just down the street that is now Benedictine University. You went to school here. We've talked already about your. Tell me what your connection is and what your family's connection is to the city of Mesa, because it seems very strong.
So my father was a cop, and my brother was also a cop. And when I was growing up in this small community of Mesa, I remember my favorite ice cream shop. And so I'd follow my family, and when I'd see that we were going to the ice cream shop, I was thrilled. And I remember every Sunday after church, I called it Pink. And my dad would know what I was talking about. It meant Dunkin' Donuts, because it was the raspberry and strawberry flavored donut, and I called it Pink as a child. So every Sunday we'd go get donuts. I had a sweet tooth, and so we'd get donuts after church. So I have fond memories of that. And Del Taco. You know what I'm talking about, right?
We've got some institutions in Mesa that, as far as restaurants goes, Del Taco we've never listed so far. I mean, I was a Mata's guy. Some people were El Charro's guys. Do you remember those places?
Could you repeat the names?
Mata's and El Charro. And when you were talking about ice cream, I was guessing you were either going.
Oh, I know El
there
Charro.
You go.
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
okay,
yes,
El
yes.
Charro, of
That's
course.
a good one.
I was thinking you were going to say 31 Flavors on Main Street or Thrifty Ice Cream also on Main Street. But you went to Dunkin' Donuts, right?
Oh, yeah, Dunkin' Donuts right there. And I also remember that there was a bicycle shop.
Pat's Schwinn's. Yeah.
Yes, that was the one.
I'm sorry, you guys. We're going to have a great talk, and
Great chat.
we'll check in with you later. Could be Mesa Trivia night.
Yeah, we're old farts now, so
Yeah.
get out of here. We're just talking about history. We'll see you later.
Well, getting back on track to things that people might, this is your crowd. It's fun to see. These are your family, your friends, your fans, and so I bet they would love to stay here all night. But let's talk a little bit about growing up in Mesa. But what was it like back then? I think we've come a long way since then as far as helping deaf children, right? And figuring out the best way to help them integrate and to be successful and to respond. Where were when you were growing up in the 70s and 80s? What was that like, particularly in a smaller than average city back then of Mesa, Arizona?
So when I was born, my parents didn't realize I was deaf until I was about 10 months old. And they were shocked. They didn't know what to do, and they brought me to a doctor. And remember, back then, we didn't have much access as a deaf community, and they didn't know what to do with deaf children. But we were so lucky that this particular doctor recommended that my parents learn sign language. So my parents were like, okay. And they put me in a school for the deaf, the Phoenix Day School for the Deaf. And so I started going to school there in kindergarten and throughout elementary school. And then when I was a freshman, I decided to transfer to a mainstream school because I really wanted to learn how to interact with hearing people. Because when I was growing up, I realized that I saw that there were a lot of hearing people out there, and I didn't see too many people using sign language out there. And therefore, I thought I really had to learn how to socialize and interact with hearing people. So I transferred to a public school, and they had a drama program, and they had a great sports program. And my school for the deaf had a very small audience for their football game. Maybe about 20 people were watching the football games at the school for the deaf. And then at my new high school, there was thousands watching the football games. And so it was so inspiring to see my two older brothers play football. And so I'd frequently go to their football games, and I was comparing their experience and their huge crowds to my experience at the school for the deaf. So I really wanted to be who I was. I didn't care where I was from, and I'm here on this planet Earth. I guess there's a reason, and maybe there's a plan for me. Maybe there's a purpose for me being here on Earth. And I wanted to share my experience with other people. And of course, there was barriers and misunderstandings and communication breakdowns, but it really taught me a lot. And it taught me how to learn to live with other people. And some people think that being deaf means that everyone is deaf and we're like a monolith, but we're not. There is plenty of hearing people who aren't so smart, and some have common sense, some are intelligent, some are stupid, just like deaf people. And we are all different individually. And I just want to make sure that we look at each other clearly, that we're just human beings. And it's just how you socialize and interact with people. And so that's why I feel really strongly that there was no one who could take my deafness away. And no one could fix me. Why would they need to fix me? I don't need to be fixed. And why would I try and adapt to the hearing world? Why would I want to do that? I just want to be myself and be who I am. And my real question is, it's really up to the outside world and how they are involved and accept me as a person who happens to be deaf.
Troy, I heard that, yeah, that's great. When your parents were trying to raise you the best they could, did I understand that maybe your dad really got into sign? He signed with you, but your mother would speak, and I think that they were trying to have two different maybe approaches. Was that a good idea, or how did that work out?
So my dad was so skilled at sign language, and he really picked it up. And I was shocked, actually. And he was so busy being the police chief, right? And he was a father. He had 4 kids. And he still found time to learn sign language, which was amazing. And my mother, she had a lot of love. And she was a very sweet woman. She was a bit shy and a bit embarrassed to learn sign language, maybe. And so when I got a credit card bill, my mom would always write down and say, "Hey, Troy, you got to pay your bill. They're going to chase you down. There's going to be compound interest." And I'd say, "Okay, Mom, okay." And she would write notes to me quite a bit. And she really took a lot of time to write me these notes. And so looking back, she really did care. She was just trying to figure out a way to communicate with me. It didn't matter if she was fluent in sign language or not, or if she wrote down on a piece of paper. It was just she wanted to reach me and communicate with me. So I was so lucky to have such a great family who happened to be from Mesa. And what a wonderful community we have here. And so I'm so proud that everyone who was around me when I was growing up here in Mesa and everything they taught me, and everyone told me that, hey, your parents and your dad, there was a person that told me, I think just a couple days ago. So I was in a restaurant, and his name was Jack. Jack, what's the last name? Jack Joyce, thank you. So Jack Joyce was the principal of my high school. And he's retired, and he saw me in a restaurant. I think it was yesterday. And so we bumped into each other. We said hello. And he goes, "Hey, I knew your dad." And he said that my father was an icon of this community. And I said, "Really? I didn't know that." And so I told myself, the perception of the hearing community on my father, how they perceived my dad. I didn't actually know how the city of Mesa perceived my father. As a deaf person, I'm always catching up, and I'm always finding out that information a little bit late, and now I'm finding out who my father really was. Because again, it was that damn access. There just wasn't access back then for deaf people. And so today with technology, it really is improving, and there's so much information for me to catch up on.
That's great. Is Mr. Joyce here today? Mr. Gilmore's here. Mr. Joyce, are you here? There he is. Hi, Mr. Joyce. There's your principal right there, Troy.
That was my principal.
That's good.
There he is.
Thanks for being here, Mr. Joyce.
And was it Westwood?
It was Westwood.
Westwood High School.
Yes.
Yes, at Westwood High School. He was my principal at Westwood High School. And so it's funny, he came up to me and he took his hat off and I recognized his face.
That's great. Troy, so before you went to Westwood, you would get on a bus every morning and go to the school for the deaf. Is that correct? Because here's the reason I'm asking. I heard that when you were maybe thinking about becoming an actor as a young child, there were a couple of people who really had a big influence on you. One was Mr. Tom, and the other was a Mr. Jerry. Did Tom and Jerry have an impact on your life at an early age?
Oh, yes. And you know why?
Tell me.
So Tom and Jerry didn't have any dialogue on the show, and I felt a connection with them. Because it was their facial expressions. It was the fight scenes, the eyes bulging out, the tongues sticking out. It was great. It was so visual. And so as a young deaf boy, I really enjoyed watching this cartoon. And so don't forget that back in the 70s, there wasn't any closed captioning. Absolutely none.
Yeah.
And so I changed the channel, and so you just see dialogue or a talking head on TV, and then Tom and Jerry would come on, and I was thrilled. And I could not miss Tom and Jerry. And my point is I would memorize an episode of Tom and Jerry, and the following morning I would recant the entire episode on the bus. Yeah. And I'd tell these kids what I had seen the day before. And as I was telling them, I realized these kids just had this reaction and this light in their eyes. It was like this electricity. And these reactions, they really made me happy. And it fed me that energy, and it made me feel good. And so I learned I really enjoyed acting. But my question was, where was I going to go from there? How was I going to get involved in acting? And that's where my history as an actor began.
Yeah, that's great. Let's move on then to these years at Westwood. I was impressed. One of the first things I knew about you is that you played on the basketball team at Westwood. I think it was probably was Buddy Doolin your coach?
Yes,
okay.
That was my coach. Oh, I loved Buddy.
Yeah, but he's a
I wondered, I'm really hoping to bump into him someday. And the assistant coach too. Was it Trout? Trout, the assistant coach Trout. And so he actually learned sign language. And can I tell you a story?
Please do.
So when I was on the basketball team, after a few weeks, I taught some of the players some dirty sign language. And so all the players were thrilled to learn all of these vulgarities in sign language. And so it just so happened we were playing a game, and one of the players got fouled. And he blew up, and he signed a dirty sign to the referee. And the referee didn't know what he was saying, but all the players on the bench knew exactly what he was saying and started laughing hysterically after this foul. And so my coach was kind of stupefied, and he looked at my team's reaction. He was upset about the foul, and he's like, "Why are you guys laughing?" And so the next day, he did his research, and he realized that I had taught my team these dirty signs. And so he punished all of us, and we had to run these suicide drills, 17 laps, right? All the way down, full court suicide drills in less than a minute. When that was done, the coach points at me. He goes, "Troy, you're staying right here. You taught them dirty signs. You have to run another bunch of suicide laps." And it wasn't fair. Yeah. I was like, "Why me? Why are you punishing me?" There's so many swear words in English, right? Hearing people swear all the time.
Well, I did have a conversation with since you received the Academy Award, I did bump into Buddy Doolin, and I asked him, and he was he was very excited to confirm that you were a wonderful member of his team, and I'll ask him next time I see him about the swear words. So that'll be a great story. So
definitely.
Besides being involved in sports at Westwood, did you get involved in drama and theater in school as well?
Yes, I did. I was involved at Westwood High School with basketball, football, and drama. and the drama department. And so that was a big reason why I wanted to transfer to Westwood High School. Because at my school for the deaf, they didn't have a drama program. And I was a young kid. I really had that passion. I really wanted to act. I wanted to be involved in the arts. And that was one of the big reasons why I transferred to Westwood.
Yeah. It was Jadine Jones. Was Jadine Jones the teacher that? I remember when I was there.
Yes, Dr. Jones.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay.
Is Dr. Jones still alive?
He's not. He's passed a few years ago, but he was back. Westwood had
Amen.
some great programs back then, didn't they? Still do.
Oh yes, wonderful programs. And that was really my first drama teacher,
Yeah.
Dr. Jones.
On the screen earlier, when we were showing a YouTube video of a pantomime that you do, you know, where you're the bowling ball and you're the basketball, and did you start doing that back in high school? Or I've heard that, or did you perform things in talent shows in high school?
That's an interesting question. So when I was 12 years old, I was at the Phoenix School for the Deaf, and there was a theater troupe of 3 deaf actors and 3 hearing actors who visited our school. And it just so happened that that night, my parents were in the audience, and I was watching as well, and the guy on stage did the bowling ball act for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I was laughing, and my hearing parents were also laughing. And I saw that all of these deaf and hearing audience members were laughing simultaneously. So that really made me an impact on me at 12 years old. So afterwards, I walked up to the deaf actor. His name is Dennis Webster. Dennis Webster. And so he said, "Are you deaf?" And Dennis said, "Yeah." And I said, "Can I act?" And he goes, "Yeah, of course you can." And that really increased my hopes. I really felt a spark with that conversation with Dennis Webster. And so with the release of CODA, finally, they're able to watch sign language on screen with subtitles, with sound, and you can have a hearing and deaf audience react simultaneously together. And so that's what I was waiting for so long, ever since the silent film era, ever since Charlie Chaplin.
That's great.
Do you remember Charlie Chaplin?
Of course.
And so then they'd have like subtitles on screen just for a moment, right? And so they would tell you what was going on even without sound. And so back then, the deaf audience members were able to enjoy silent films. And then when the talkies came in, we were segregated as an audience and marginalized from the experience. And we were always behind and trying to catch up and waiting for access. Finally, we had VHS tapes with closed captioning, and then so on and so on and so on, and until we are today. And so that's kind of the history of the deaf experience. And it's not my fault, but it's just how the outside world perceived us and forgot about us.
Sure. Well, that sounds like it was a pretty significant experience where you had a very talented deaf actor look you in the eye and say, yes, you can be an actor as a deaf person. And how do you feel?
Yes, that really kept my hope alive.
I mean, you now are that person to countless number of young deaf actors. How does that make you feel?
There's a lot of kids out there, and every time I tell them, you know, I think about the past, and I think about what happened to me, that Dennis Webster inspired me. And now these kids are looking at me as a deaf actor, and I completely get it. I completely understand.
Yeah.
I have to tell them the same thing. You can do it too. And now I can pass the torch to the new generation.
That's very inspiring is a word that I'm going to try to not wear out, you know, during the course of this experience. But one more Westwood story I want to get out of you. People are still talking about a graduation speech that you delivered in 1988. You spoke at your high school graduation, and that was a particularly tough time in your life, right? Because shortly before that, your father had his accident. Can you talk about how that impacted your life?
So when that happened, my father's car accident, I gave a speech, and my brother Brian was in the audience, and he filmed my speech with an old VHS camcorder. And so I signed my speech, and when it was over, the reason why he filmed it was he wanted to show, my father wasn't able to attend because he was in the hospital. And so my brother Brian brought the VHS tape of my speech to the hospital, and I'll never forget that night. So my father was in a wheelchair, and they brought a TV with a VHS player into his hospital room, and we all sat together. And my father was able to watch my speech. And I never saw my father react like that. He just broke down into tears and was bawling. Obviously, he was so proud. And I completely understand, you know. I think I have explained enough.
That's great. Well, and I don't mean to press you on this, but the other insight that you gave us into your life when you accepted the Academy Award is you mentioned your brother's accident and your father's, and so do you think going through those tragedies as a young man, did that contribute to this resilience that has served you so well in your acting career?
That's very true. I never thought of myself as deaf. You know, oh, have sympathy for me. Oh, the world is ending. No one's helping me. Cry me a river. I never thought that way. You know, after my brother and my father had those accidents, my brother was only 4. And he missed his youth. You know, before he was able to run and play with the ball and play in the playground, and then he drowned, and he was bedridden. He couldn't do anything any longer. And I was 7 years old, and I was watching my brother go through that, and it really taught me so much, and I struggled. I really felt torn. And throughout the years, I grew, and I grew to accept what had happened to my brother and accept for who he was. And then my father was in this car accident. And there was another disabled member of our family, and my father could no longer sign after his accident. And I remember this one specific night where my father asked me, "Hey, Troy, do you mind taking me to see my younger brother, Brent?" And I said, "Sure." And so I drove my dad to see my brother, Brent, in the hospital and wheeled my father in. And my brother, Brent, was lying in a bed, and my dad was sitting in his wheelchair, and I'm sitting in the room. And my father had his hands on top of the wheelchair, and he waved to me. He was trying to touch my brother, Brent. And so I was sitting there watching this interaction between the two of them. And so I picked up my brother's hand, and I put it in my father's, so they were able to touch. And at that particular moment, I saw that these two members of my family were disabled, and their hands were touching each other, and mine as well. And I was feeling so torn at that moment. And looking at myself, I was like, I'm going to cry about being deaf? Forgive my French. But look, you know, my father and my brother and everything they had to go through, they had such courage. And that's why I wanted to dedicate my Oscar to the CODA community, the deaf community, and the disabled community, because I understood through my personal experience what many of these people have gone through.
Yeah. Your father was a great man. The city of Mesa owes him a lot, but I assume he was a very practical man. He was a police chief, for heaven's sake. How did he feel about? Was he worried that when you told him, "Dad, I want to be an actor when I grow up," did he try to talk you out of that?
He was very concerned. So my dad always called me a risk taker. And looking back, I understand why.
Yeah.
So now I'm a little older and a little wiser, and I realized I had a tough life. I struggled to pay the bills. I struggled to support my family. And so I got it. My dad was right in many ways, I have to admit. But I'm so glad that I was able to accomplish winning this award, and I wish my parents were here to see it.
Yeah.
But even though they're not here, after I won the Oscar, I went to the cemetery, and I brought the Oscar, and I showed it to them.
That's great. What did your, I've heard stories of different careers your dad would try to steer you towards. What did he want you to be instead of an actor?
He wanted me to become an engineer, a teacher, a kind of standard, safe, stable type job. And I get why he encouraged me in that way. It was to have insurance and health insurance and all that. It's very common, but I didn't realize that I was crazy to take these risks. I do have to admit that. My father was right.
So you, against your father's advice, committed yourself to pursuing an acting career. What was the first break that you got?
I was stubborn. I was stubborn.
I've heard that.
That's right.
Yeah.
But whatever I did, I just wanted to do. I enjoyed really seeing my father. When he retired, my dad didn't want to just sit at home, and so he would come and see my shows. And he'd see me perform in Sacramento, California, in Texas. And it really gave my father something to do. He was able to get out of the house, take a vacation, and see his son perform. And so that really did mean a lot. And so there were these great moments and great memories that were very touching. Right? Right, Deanne? My wife remembers. My wife remembers my father came and saw my plays.
That's great. So
my wife is amazing.
Let's talk about those early plays.
She's awesome.
What was the first break that you got to become a professional actor? Was it on the stage, or how did that start?
I hate to say it, but it was CODA. CODA was my breakthrough. Because before that, I really thought I had a breakthrough, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. I was in a TV show called Criminal Minds, and it was a quite popular TV show, and I had a role, and I thought that would be my breakthrough, and that faded a few years later. And on the theater stage, I continued to perform, and I thought I had a breakthrough, and there'd be great reviews and articles that would come out, but not enough people really knew my name and didn't know who I was. I didn't feel like these plays were a breakthrough. So my best answer is really CODA. It got me this Oscar. Mm-hmm. And so now my world has changed, right?
That's good. Was there a time pre-CODA that you started to think, gee, maybe my dad was right. Maybe I should hang it up and stop acting?
Absolutely. I was ready to quit. I was on my last straw. I was down to a bare thread. I just wanted to protect and support my family. And really, deep down, of course, I loved acting. And it was so hard to even consider letting go of acting and letting it go. But I had to think of my future. I was in my 50s. I was an old fart. I had to think about my retirement plan, right? Mm-hmm. And all of the above and all that shit. And it was running through my mind. And so then with CODA, it was my last shot. It was my last chance, my last gamble. And I just really had to put it all out there with all of my emotions. I didn't really care what people thought about me. I just needed to put it all forward. I didn't realize where it would lead me to. It led to Sundance. And we had success at Sundance. And then our film was purchased by Apple. And oh my gosh, everything that it led to from there. It was amazing. It was amazing. It was an amazing journey, and it's amazing I'm here today. I love you all.
Amen. So let's talk about CODA, because this is, the best picture of the year. This is a picture that's going to be very historic. Probably like...
It's historic because I really look at CODA as there's been a long history of something that was missing. It was this gap, right? And there was always segregation and separation between hearing and deaf people. And so with CODA portrayed the hearing audience members who can hear and communicate verbally. And then on the flip side, she was also representative of the deaf community because she could communicate in sign language. And that intersection finally existed. And this CODA character bridged the hearing and deaf communities. And I was like, it's about time. Finally, hearing people are able to enter our culture, and as deaf people we're able to enter hearing culture, and it didn't matter if there was sound or not, and it just portrayed the CODA experience and what they went through and what this CODA character went through, and it's something that we were waiting for as a deaf community for such a long time. And now look where we are now. And my daughter's a CODA in real life, And she has a lot of friends who are CODAs, and I have friends who are CODAs. So it really increased awareness, and it was a big step forward for us.
Yeah, it's a great premise for telling a story about a family. And when I heard that your daughter in real life is a musician, I thought, wait a minute, this is just too much of a coincidence. Can you compare your own family where your daughter is CODA? She, as I understand it, is very talented and interested in music as a career. Or how do you is that just a strange coincidence?
Are you talking about the character of Frank Rossi or my personal life, or both?
Yes. Is it just interesting that your family is so similar to the family in the movie, or did that contribute to some of the things that happened in the movie?
It's important to keep in mind the location of where a deaf family lives. So if they're in a rural area, there's not much access to interpreters, so they're more reliant on their CODA kids to save them headaches. And so they rely on their CODA kids to interpret for them. And so if deaf people live in a larger city, like New York or something, there's a lot of interpreters and there's a lot more access. And parents wouldn't need to rely on their CODA daughters. Sign language is dangerous.
Yeah.
I just knocked over this water bottle. Okay. And so when I saw this small community that was Gloucester, that was represented in our film, Gloucester, Massachusetts. So you see the difference between a rural area and a big city as far as access for a deaf family. And so in our film CODA, it was representative of the variety of stories, because CODAs aren't a monolith either. Like the screw up in the doctor's office and that scene in CODA. And that represented a lot of actual CODA experiences. But what are the similarities between CODA in the movie and your daughter? Okay, and so in real life, my daughter loves music. But I told myself, I can't be selfish. I'm like, hey, I'm deaf. You got to do it my deaf way. You have to follow my culture and what I do. No, but I didn't want to force her in that way. I really respected her passion and wanted to encourage her. And so it turned out she liked music and she wanted to play the piano. So I kept my mouth shut and I encouraged her because I wanted her to experiment and have those experiences and just follow her dreams, whatever her goals may be in the future. And at the same time, I watched her rehearse and practice the piano, and I'd put my hand on the piano to feel the vibrations. And then my daughter said, hey, Dad, I have 2 different songs. Do you want to come over here and feel the piano? I said, sure. So I set my hand on the piano, and I was feeling the vibrations. And in the second song, I noticed the difference. I said, I like the first one better, because to me, as a deaf person, I could feel the vibrations. I don't know the hearing perspective, but it's fun for me to share that with her. And I really did learn a lot from her about different types of music and different musicians' names, whether it's rock and roll or country or religious music or whatever. So we have those discussions, and I learned a little bit about it. And I didn't want to feel like I was limiting my daughter, and that's important for me.
I think
and the character in CODA with music and your daughter, were there similarities? I think.
Yeah.
And so Frank Rossi's daughter, Ruby. So Ruby Rossi, she was able to have that experience at home with sign language with her deaf family members, and she'd have to code switch going to her hearing high school to really fit that social situation. And then at home, she'd have to code switch again to interact with her deaf family. And so this code switching was constant. And so I think that's what all CODAs do go through.
One of the most powerful scenes in the movie, when I watched it, was that scene where you and your daughter in the movie, where she invited you to touch her throat and have this experience of feeling the vibrations of music. Was that something that was already scripted when you showed up, or did this experience with your daughter contribute to that scene?
It was a bit of improv, actually, that caused that to happen. Because when I first read the script, I noticed that it was a bit too much written, of course, from the hearing perspective. So I told our director and writer, Sean Hader, do you mind if I try this from my deaf perspective? And she said, sure, because I could understand the intention and what she was trying to say with the story, and I wanted to make an adjustment. And there was a line in the script. After Ruby finishes singing, her father Frank says, "Thank you." And to be honest, thank you is such a boring word because everyone knows that sign for thank you. If you go to Starbucks, they say thank you and you give them a thumbs up. At the airport, they go thank you. So everyone knows that sign. That's a boring sign, right? I wanted something unique for this special moment with this relationship between father and daughter and him trying to understand her passions. So I wanted to have eye contact, eye to eye. So when the singing is over, Frank notices that the expression on her face changes. And she kind of looks at him, "Do you get it?" And so Frank reacts. And Frank kind of has a hard time. So he smiles, and at the same time, he's not quite sure. And so he kisses his daughter on the forehead. And to me, that equated thank you. Because the audience isn't stupid. I mean, at least I hope not. Is that true? Okay. So the audience can figure it out themselves. The audience has that intelligence. And so everything that you see on the big screen, it tells you so much without words, without dialogue, without signs. Mm-hmm. And so really, it was what I wanted to portray.
So CODA is going to be a very inspirational film for the deaf community, but back in 1986, the film Children of a Lesser God, Marlee Matlin won the Academy Award, the first deaf actor to win an award. What was it like? I mean, were you a little starstruck? I mean, because she's a household name. She's a legit movie star. Did you know her before this movie? And if not, was it kind of like you're walking into the Oscar-winning deaf actress? Was that do you have stars in your eyes when you were around her? Because I get the feeling you two are pretty tight friends now.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah.
We're definitely good friends. So I was acting at Deaf West Theater in Los Angeles, and Marlee was one of the board members of Deaf West. And she would always go to opening night to any production I was in. So Marlee would frequently come to see me act on stage, and we got to know each other ever since around 1994. And so she got to know my work, and then that's what led to. We got to know each other a bit, and then one day I was cast for CODA, and we had known each other, and so I knew that she was a serious actor, she knew I was a serious actor, and we knew what we were doing, and we wanted to put our best foot forward for our production.
That's great. I wondered if now maybe she brags that she drops your name at parties because you're the big star now. That's fun.
I never think of things that way. I'm just the same old Troy, but it's interesting how people now perceive me. Yeah. I don't realize, wherever I go that people look at me differently sometimes.
Tell us about the Oscar Awards ceremony that you went to. Was that the first Oscar Awards you'd ever been to? And if so, what is that like just to go to the Oscars and then, be there as a nominee?
It was overwhelming. Of course, I watched the Oscars on television, and I had seen it, and being there live in person and showing up, it's so overwhelming. Sometimes I'd lose my wife. I didn't know where my daughter was. It was just so chaotic with interviews and photos and all of the above, and so I really felt like I was a rookie. I was a rookie on the red carpet. I had never experienced anything like that before, and next year, I know what to expect, and I'll know what to do.
I got to tell you, I think you carry yourself like a movie star. You looked like somebody that belonged there that night. So you're either you were a very good actor that night as well. If you were intimidated by the experience, I couldn't tell at all. I think you did a great job.
To be honest, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
I was just overwhelmed because there was so much visual stimulation. You have the red carpet, you have all these lights, you have these flash bulbs going off. I didn't really care, but it was overwhelming. And so I really forgot where I was. It was too much visual noise, if you know what I mean. So if hearing people experience loud noises, it's very distracting. That's how I felt being deaf. My eyes were distracted. And it was overwhelming. So I met Kevin Costner on the red carpet, and I got a picture with him.
Yeah.
And that made me feel a bit calmer, actually, because he's quite famous, and I'm a naive rookie.
Yeah.
But then we're next to each other. Now we're colleagues, we're peers. So I felt like now I'm okay. I was a bit nervous. I just wanted to make sure I didn't pick my nose during the red carpet.
Troy, I know.
There was just too many eyes on me, and
Yeah.
too many cameras, and too many photographers. And that was a little bit intimidating. It was a little scary. But I handled it fine, I think.
Yeah, no, you
Right,
pulled it off.
interpreter? Well, right?
Yeah.
I was with him.
You pulled it off very
You
well.
did good.
Yeah.
You did good. You had sunglasses on, so I was like, hey, you're cheating. Yeah, I had sunglasses on because I was so bright out there.
Yeah.
And so if you're hearing people, you do these interviews, you can kind of, you have to say, what? What? I can't hear you. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But me as a deaf person, I have to keep my eyes on them with all these lights, and I have to see the interpreter.
Yeah.
And that's why I have to tilt my hat down and say, okay, what's the question? Okay, and then give my answer.
That's great. So you might not be.
That's why my name sign is Troy, because I always wear hats.
You might not do the Jack Nicholson wearing sunglasses now that you're a movie star, then, right? Because you have to have eyes on everybody all the time.
Yeah, that's not me. I don't want to be too Hollywood and wear sunglasses all the time. No, it's really, I wear hats for my personal reasons.
Great. I know you are a movie buff. You've got, and I've heard that, like me and my family, you're big into Star Wars. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, I know that I've got some members of my family can tell you who Boba Fett's third cousin is, but tell me, this is exciting, and I'm not sure everybody knows this. You have recently kind of been brought into the Star Wars world. Is that right? Tell us about that.
So there was an assistant director, an AD, who was below a quite prominent director named Dave Filoni. And so Dave Filoni is quite famous in the Star Wars world. He's directed quite a bit. And so he was like, where can I find someone who knows sign language? And so he reached out to an ASL instructor, and this ASL instructor said, hey, I know someone who's an actor and a teacher, and contacted my wife, Deanne Bray. And my wife was too busy. And when my wife heard of this opportunity, she looked at me, and she knew how much I love Star Wars. And so I remember this moment where I was watching a football game on the couch, and my wife said, hey, Troy, I have a job for you. And I thought it was something in an office or like tutoring a student or something like that or whatever. The same old, same old. So I said, okay, whatever. And she said, it's related to Star Wars. And my eyes lit up. I shut off the TV, football game's off, and I go, now I'm listening. And that's where it all started. And so they asked me actually to teach sign language, and then later on, Dave Filoni, he didn't realize that I was also an actor. And so he said, hey, why don't you do both? You create this type of sign language for Star Wars as well as act. So that's where it all started. And it was really nice. I worked on 3 seasons of Mandalorian.
That's great.
And the book of Boba Fett.
So for those of us who are Mandalorian and Boba Fett fans, the Sand People, they have this very unique language that is a combination, it seems like, of sight, of sounds, and sign language. And you created that language, is that right?
Yes, I didn't want to have a standard type of sign language. I wanted it really to fit their culture, their environment, the desert, right? The Sand People, their heavy gloves. And so that would really affect the way they would gesture or sign differently. And so I remember back in the original, the 1977 Star Wars A New Hope, there was one particular moment where a Tusken Raider has a gun, and the Tusken Raider behind him taps his shoulder. And at that moment, I felt seen. It was just 2 seconds where, as a deaf person, I felt a connection because of the way that they communicated without using their voice. But they don't have any facial expressions, but they have a lot of body language. So I felt the connection at that moment in 1977. And in The Mandalorian, it was such a perfect way to incorporate the Tusken Raider sign language.
Yeah, having watched that series, I know exactly what you did, and it was very impressive. Troy, a moment ago you told us that you have a sign for your name, right? I mean, in the deaf community, people don't spell out their names. They have like a sign that is their name. Can you tell us what is your sign for your name? Because you referenced that just a second ago.
My name sign is Troy, like this. And the reason why is because my old name sign was like this, with the T, the letter T, for Troy, like this. Because my teacher asked me to take my hat off all the time. And so that was my name sign. And it just so happened I was involved in the theater department, and I had a roommate from Russia. And this roommate from Russia didn't like me signing this because that meant fuck you in Russian. And it wasn't my fault, that was Russian sign language.
Yeah.
But every time they saw me signing that, and he noticed that I always flipped up the bill of my hat back then, and he would sign that. And then later on, that became my name sign, and then it spread from there, and so I was stuck with that name sign. And so they can choose Troy, or they can spell T-R-O-Y. I don't think there's another deaf actor with my same name, is there?
That's great. Because I was wondering if you could help me out a little bit, because as mayor, there seems to be, I'm frequently getting a sign signal from people in the community, and it's not overly flattering. And so, I mean, could you maybe help me come up with a sign for my name so that I can maybe get over I don't know if it's Russian or not, but they're communicating, and I'd like to give them an alternative to that. What would be a good sign for the mayor for my name?
This is the sign for mayor.
Mayor, oh, okay.
Or, okay, let's vote. Any deaf people in the audience, do you have any ideas or recommendations? I'd like 3 deaf suggestions.
Hopefully it's more than 1 digit of your fingers that you're going to use.
Oh, okay, yes,
Okay.
no swearing, no swearing. 3 suggestions from the audience? Oh, okay, there's one. There's one. The second one?
I have a feeling there's a lot of inside
okay.
jokes going on right now.
Oh, mayor, because right now you have a Band-Aid on your head,
Yes.
so he's signing mayor like this. Okay,
Okay,
come on now.
great.
That's deaf people, we're so visual.
All right,
Was there
thanks.
3?
I'll take that, because that is a dramatic improvement over what I'm normally getting, so thank you very much. Well, Troy.
Do you want to learn how to sign it?
Yes. Band-Aid.
Okay, what's the vote? Are we doing the Band-Aid one?
We're going with Band-Aid. Okay. This is my new go-to,
Oh,
I'll
there's
be wearing
one.
a Band-Aid the rest of my
Okay,
life.
this is the sign for boss, and so it's above the head
Okay.
with the fist at the end. We like that for
Thank
Mayor
you.
Giles? Is there a vote?
All right.
Thumbs up?
Thank you. Vice Mayor, are we
Thumbs
okay
up?
with this?
Okay,
All
votes.
right.
Hands up, hands up, hands up. Okay,
Okay.
we got it. Mayor Giles. Mayor Giles, this is your name sign.
Thank you very much. Again, that's a dramatic improvement. This is, when I'm driving around town, if you see me doing this, all right, I'm just trying to retrain the community a little bit.
And it's kind of like Elvis, too. Elvis, the sign for Elvis is sort of similar, so it's a cool sign.
Oh, well, there you go. Thank you very much. Troy, we could, the folks that are here are your friends and your family, and we love you, and we could spend all night talking about you and this amazing experience that you've had. But I just want to say again, thank you for your inspiring story. Thank you for using the success that you have to be an advocate for the community, for the deaf community, and for your hometown. We can't thank you enough. You are going to inspire generations of people in Mesa and in the deaf community, and we're so proud of you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Giles.
Thank you.
It's always cool in Mesa.